Hello and welcome to Photography Out Loud. My name is Paul Davis, and as always, I'm joined with my colleague Joel Longbone. How are you doing? You all right?
Yeah, good. You?
Yeah. It's been a great. I think we should start saying we're late today.
Shocking.
I know that's a full 2 minutes. That is
you. Who knows?
So, I know we're ever going to get this pointing thing right. Hold on, I'm just going to instinctively do it. Right, go the wrong way. Yeah. It's like we haven't been doing this for a year.
I know, that's mad, isn't it?
Oh, dearie me.
Well, not quite a year. Almost a year.
Almost a year, isn't it? So
when will it? Is this our 100th episode?
No.
Not an episode, but 100th live video.
No, not yet.
No.
Okay. 98.
Oh, we're in 90.
I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're in the 90s. But Joel, it is our 30th episode of Photography Out Loud. So
wow.
I think we're doing quite well.
Yeah.
Big thanks to everyone that's managed to stay with us so far. So because obviously it wouldn't be possible without all our lovely viewers sort of liking and sharing.
As much as I like speaking to Paul, I can think of other ways of speaking to Paul.
Yeah, and it's possible because all of our lovely customers and viewers, they like and share our videos, and we can, that's a little hint for everyone just to hit that like button, hit that share button. It always helps.
It does, definitely.
Once again, another busy day, busy week as well.
Yeah, it's true. Oh, I feel like my bags tell that story. Goodness me.
Yeah.
If I could go on holiday, it looks like I'm ready. Although it's nice to go back to the barber again.
Yeah, it's
haircut.
Yeah, you've been for another haircut. It's been lovely seeing all of the wonderful customers coming into Cambria Photography here in Colwyn Bay.
Especially the ones that bring flapjack.
Yes, yeah, that was lovely.
Oh, so good.
Yeah,
such good flapjack.
We can be bribed with food-related things, and it does work.
Nothing else, just food.
Yeah, just food. It is definitely the way to our hearts. So yeah,
food and pets.
That's lovely. Yeah, absolutely.
We don't eat the pets. I'd just like to add. Just
putting that in there, just in case.
Yeah. Oh dear. Cool.
Yeah, so we had. Oh, go on.
No, you go. We had what, Paul? We had what?
I was just saying it was great. So we've had, obviously we're starting to see stock come through a little bit more now as well. So so we're starting to actually see the sights of the Canon adapters come through.
Yeah, it seems to come in and go straight back out again though.
Yeah, it does.
People have been waiting a while for it. So yeah, it's peculiar. I've never been so happy to see an adapter in my life. And I think they've pretty much all gone again. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh dear. I'm sure Sarah's doing a happy dance when she saw some of the adapters come in. So she's like, that's for that customer, that's for that customer, that's for that customer. So yeah, just reeling off names.
That's brilliant.
Oh, mate, when can we be in the same room together? I hate this lag. It's very frustrating.
I think we're struggling with lag today, actually. The lag's pretty bad, so apologise for anyone. We are sort of doing the horrible thing of that silence, isn't it? It's like it's not even frowned upon on the radio. It's like it can like cost you your job, isn't it, on the radio if you have that little pause and there's nothing there. So yeah. Over the last couple of weeks, we've had quite a lot of news and updates. So we've obviously we've seen some updates from all the manufacturers really, which has been really nice. But it starts to slow down a little bit. There has been one new announcement. Yes. From
Sigma.
Oh, we're so out of sync. It's not even the internet. We're just not vibing, Joel. We've lost it. We're gonna have to go back to YouTube school on how to present.
Did we ever go in the first place?
That was the problem. That's what it was.
It seems to suggest we actually know what we're doing, Paul, which we clearly don't.
No, definitely don't.
Idea.
So I think what Joel was about to say, as I rudely interrupted him, is that we have seen a new lens come out from Sigma, haven't we, Joel?
Yep.
35 new lenses.
Could you imagine? It's like a whole mount's worth of lenses. So no, the new Sigma 35mm looks pretty good.
Yeah, the 1.4 DGDN. So it's been once again totally remastered for the mirrorless system full frame. So it's going to be available for the Sony E-mount system and also the L mount. Yeah, it is L mount, isn't it? Yeah. So
do you know, with the DG and the DN, do you not want to just put vowels in between the D and the G and the D and the N to make words?
What sort of like?
When I see DG, I see dig, dug, dog.
Yeah. Let's call it Dig Dan. The Sigma Dig Dan.
Yeah. Or the Dig Don. Or the Dug Don. Dog Don. There we go. Oh dear. There we go. Paul's gone. Good afternoon, Ian. It was very good to see you today. On here, I've not seen you in real life today, not that I know of. Although masks make it impossible to know. He says, "Hi, Paul and Joel. Hope you have recovered from yesterday's celebrations, Joel." Yeah, I don't drink, so it wasn't too difficult. Although my eyes, the bags under my eyes, would suggest that I had a very heavy night and no sleep. But I feel like that's probably just the children that I have rather than any drinking or anything. So
I had a nice food meal that you're still digesting.
Oh, it was very good food though. Hickories. Yes, it's good food. It's good food. And there are other barbecue establishments available. Yeah. Although where they are, I have no idea.
And it just goes back to that point as well that we've made about sort of getting out with photography, getting out taking pictures. Obviously, we've been able to sort of go out and sort of enjoy sort of outdoor food back in Wales. And if you like the tipple, then obviously we've seen pubs back open as well. So we're definitely getting that vibe for everything sort of going in the right direction, haven't we?
Yeah. Talking about cameras and taking cameras out, I took my camera with me last night, X100V. Oh my goodness. So good to use. Such a good camera. I think I might be in love with that camera. Probably my favorite camera.
We've mentioned it all the time as well. You know, the color science that Fuji have within those particular cameras. They're just.
I know your immediate reaction when I showed you.
I was like, you've edited that. Yeah, you've edited that.
I haven't. Straight from the Fuji camera remote app onto my phone. So I could send them to my wife.
With your favorite film style.
Yeah. It's a new one, so I've not really ever played with it. Classic neg. Yeah,
classic neg.
Because I normally like neg high or neg soft. Maybe classic chrome, depending. But if it's people, it's normally neg high or neg soft. But yeah. I feel like the time of day was good for the coming into golden hour. But yeah, it's just so good. It's really nice depth to the image. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're getting on with it, and you know you've always shown in the past that you are an X100 type of guy, and you've always loved that range, and once again just very little effort, been able to produce professional looking pictures within a sort of in a non-professional environment, so it's getting that sort of family friendly sort of feel. That
you said. It's just Instagram ready. Not that I put them on Instagram, but they just look great straight out of the camera. You don't have to mess about with them in Lightroom or Photoshop or Affinity or whatever other version of photo editing software you like to use. It was just
it just makes it nice and easy, doesn't it?
Because my wife is normally like, when are those images going to get edited when they're on my Sony? I love my Sony, but I do feel like I have to edit them to get them the way I want them to look. But with the Fuji, bang, bang, bang. I do shoot in RAW on the Fuji just in case that, I've had to under or overexpose. But yeah, it just worked last night. It's fantastic. And the silver looks.
Yeah, it does. It is very nice. It is very nice. It is very nice.
Although if they did it in space grey or that, what was it? the Jura that they did for the X.
Oh yeah, but that would add like 400 quid on top of the price, though, wouldn't it? That's the problem.
So, at least it wouldn't scratch, though.
Yeah, it is nice though, that Jura Black. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's got that sort of like copper look to it, hasn't it? More than anything.
Yeah,
which,
like that
just
metal grey vibe.
Yeah, sets it off from everything else. So no, I'm glad you've been getting on with the X100V. Absolutely lovely, and it'll be nice to play with that Sigma lens once we see it. So I don't think there's too much more news, though. We should say we are in the last elements of planning something for the end of May. So everyone watching, please keep an eye out. We will be dropping. Go on, and also
fingers crossed. Hopefully, you guys can be involved. Small numbers
in small amounts.
You guys can be involved.
Yeah, we're figuring out the logistics.
We want to try and bring the show, but obviously we can't have the show in the shop. So we've got some great ideas, but I think we should just say, make sure your cars have got fuel in. Yeah. So you're ready to go.
Ready to go. Absolutely fantastic. Right. So I comb my beard, and apparently Joel does it now as well.
Synchronized moustache combing.
Yeah. Oh, dear. We can't get our presenting synced, but we can certainly get our moustache grooming synced. So
I'll be glad when masks go, so you get rid of beard kink.
Yeah. We're looking forward to that day.
Yeah. Johnny Mo says, "Afternoon, likey lads." Afternoon, Johnny.
I believe lads. I like that.
Yeah. I believe you enjoyed the weekend at the workshop. Because it was I went on a Saturday and Sarah went on a Sunday. It was very good. Apparently, Sarah was almost in tears at the end because it was a very good end to the day. They let all the birds out and they were going around. Amazing. So,
sounds fantastic.
Yeah, great one with Gary Jones. So, Ian says, "Is it my birthday party then, guys?"
Yeah, going out for your birthday at the end of the May.
Yeah. Well, right. Are we going into training now then, Paul?
Yeah, I was just about to say, I think that's everything for the news this week. Obviously, there's still lots of things coming out, and we will also probably next week have a bit more news about what we hopefully be able to do at the end of the May for you. Let's jump straight into training. Hello, welcome back to... no, I've already mucked it up. I'm going to have to do that bit again because we do plan to actually edit these bits out, don't we? And put them into some sort of slideshow. So for everyone watching live, this is going to be hilarious. But if you're rewatching this, you'll never know. So, and pause. Hello, welcome back to the beginners training. If you're just tuning in, my name's Paul Davis, and with me there is Joel Longbone. Last time we were looking into the what your camera does as far as when you start changing the shutter and aperture, what sort of effects it actually has. We got quite a lot of interest back from that. Just let me bring up the screen share. So we were looking into things like, the different effects that changing our aperture does, the different effects of changing our shutter speed does. So we were sort of saying that if you're wanting to control sort of how much blur that you wanted in the background or how sharp you wanted your background to be, then you would sort of change your aperture. And then if you wanted to express motion or stop motion, this is typically what you'd use the shutter speed for. But these were the effects that these particular settings would give you. Ultimately as well, your shutter and aperture does control your exposure as well. And today what we wanted to do is dig down a little bit into how your exposure works. So let's jump straight in. I can hear you giggling in the background there. So the way that your camera works out its exposure, so basically how the camera determines how bright or how dark your picture is going to be, is inside the camera it has something called a metering mode. And on various different cameras, unfortunately, these can be called lots of different things. So if you're ever unsure about the different metering modes inside your camera, you can always get in touch with us. On screen, we are showing the sort of, well, tend to be more popular Canon and Nikon. They sort of still have the sort of photographic names. But there's nothing wrong with any of the other manufacturers, is there, Joel?
Nope.
So when we look at metering, it's probably one of the hardest potentially things to get your head around, because you think, well, what is metering? How does it work? So hopefully today we're going to try and explain and just sort of open up, you know, what your metering does, the different metering modes that are available, and the effects that it has on your camera, and, you know, how your camera changes things as well. So we'll try and make it as simple as possible. But obviously, if you're watching live, you can sort of always ask any questions. So if you've got any questions that you want to ask about how your camera exposes, you can leave a comment. If you're rewatching this at any point, you can still leave a question into the comments, and we can always get back to you at any point. So typically what we find in cameras is generally we tend to have 3 different types of metering modes. So there is a matrix metering mode, or evaluative, as sometimes it's called. And this mode is essentially looking at the whole picture and deciding what is best. There is a center weighted, which concentrates predominantly on the center of the frame. So it's sort of in the name a little bit.
That was what I was thinking.
Yeah, it is. It's and then we've also got spot metering as well, which once again sort of suggests within the name, you know, it's down to a single spot within the frame. But probably the most confusing is when we say, you know, metering. You know, what is it trying to do? What is it trying to meter for? Well, typically in most cameras, what they're trying to do is they're trying to get you back to grey. So unfortunately, deep down inside, cameras are very, very boring, and they like to be grey. That's all that they're trying to do. They're just trying to create a grey life for us.
Fashionable at the moment, though, isn't it? Grey is fashionable.
Grey is fashionable. You know what? That grey on there, it's the same colour as the Mac, in it. I'm just saying.
Almost,
you know,
yeah, almost.
It's a nice grey.
18%.
Yeah. So essentially, when your camera is metering, so it doesn't matter what metering mode it's on. So if you've got lots of different metering points inside your camera switched on, and it's taking an average of all of them, or whether it's center weighted or whether it's spot, the average is always trying to work out as grey. Very, very boring. So essentially, if you point the camera to something white, what it's going to do is it's going to turn something white to grey. And the same, if you point it at something black, it's going to turn black to grey. So it always tries to sort of work to grey, which is very depressing on cameras. It really, really is. So there are some features now built into modern cameras, especially things like smartphones, compact cameras, and some of the up-to-date mirrorless cameras, where you would have things like face detection built in. They are designed to look at the face and work out the exact exposure from the face, opposed to sort of going off a general sort of grey, and obviously takes into account like different skin tones and things like that. So if you've got a lighter skin tone, a darker skin tone, some of the up-to-date cameras are taking this into account as well. But on a whole, generally, what you find is that cameras really do like to go back to being grey. But when you're on a full matrix metering mode, like we've seen in this particular picture here, because we've got lots of white in the picture, so we've got white in the sky, we've got white in the clouds, and we've also got some mid-tones, which would be the grey. So the mountain in the background, the lake is considered mid-tone. So it's that rough grey if this was black and white. And then we've also got things that are black within the frame as well. So once again, when this is on matrix metering, so there's lots of things within the frame looking at the picture, and they're all trying to even out and do what they want, trying to get you back to grey. By the time these have all sort of had a little fight with each other, you actually end up with a picture that actually looks okay, because there's white, there's black, there's lots of everything within the frame, so the picture comes out correctly exposed. And then in this particular picture, once we go to something like center weighted, because the center of the picture is that majority of that sort of grey, it did slightly change. So if I just switch back to the before and then moving on to the center weighted, you can see that it does slightly lighten because for the center of the frame. And then the same when we move on to spot, there's nothing much that changes too much. The sky, we've started to lose out a little bit, because the center of the frame is predominantly grey, and that's the area that it's looking at the moment. Now, when we go on to something where we've got a lot of black in the picture, so for instance, like a blackbird or a crow, then things start to change a little bit as well. Now, particularly what's happening in this particular picture is that there's a lot of highlight within the background. There's a lot of dark within the foreground. So what's happening is that, again, the camera is looking at the whole of the frame and it's deciding what to do best. And actually what's happening in this particular picture is that it's deciding to sort of make the picture slightly darker to compensate for the white background. Now, for this particular picture, if we move to center weighted, what starts to happen is that we get a more correct exposure on our subject, because it's looking generally at the middle of the frame. Once again, it's not right down the middle. That's what we use spot for. So it's still evaluating a little bit of the background, but generally orientating itself on the exposure of the blackbird in the middle of the frame. But then also when we move to spot, what starts to happen is, because it is a black bird, and as we've just sort of looked at, the camera likes to turn sort of black to grey. What happens is that this starts to overexpose. A drink break.
Yeah.
And a cough break.
Oh.
Dear me. It's just to prove that we're live, isn't it, Joel, more than anything? So, and this is sometimes that we see a lot, and it's actually very difficult to sort of get the right sort of metering mode in sort of certain situations. And even when we move on to something that's really quite tricky, I mean, this is a sort of white fox in white snow. So once again, what it's doing is it's turning all of the white lovely snow and the white fox, it's actually turning them grey. Now, and then as we start to move to something like center weighted, then it's still grey within the middle of the frame. So, nothing is still happening. And even when we move on to spot, the middle of the frame is still white and the camera's turning it grey. So in some situations, especially tricky situations like this, it becomes very, very hard to control, your exposure, even by changing your metering mode. And sometimes it just involves actually moving to something different to help you change this. We have covered it in the past. It's using something like exposure compensation to help out with this. So once again, the camera has exposed what it thinks correctly. So it's turning all this lovely white snow, it's turning it grey. And the only way that we can really do this is by actually disagreeing with the camera. And that's what exposure compensation is. It's sort of you having a slight disagreement with the camera of what it thinks. It thinks grey, but we need to say that it's white. And we can simply start to increase our exposure on something like exposure compensation, and we can actually end up with the desired photo that we actually wanted. So you're moving things like your exposure, moving your exposure around by metering modes can be quite tricky, and it's something that we do come across with a lot, sort of in the shop as well, isn't it, Joel? So
yeah.
The question that we do get asked a lot about is, what metering mode should I have it on, and what's the best? And even though we sort of recommend maybe a setting, looking back at pictures, it's still never quite perfect, is it?
No. And I think the other thing is to understand that you have to choose your metering based on your subject, and also what you're going to do with the shot. If you want, your center subject correctly exposed, and you're not going to edit it in any way, you're just going to use the JPEG straight out of camera, then obviously a spot is probably going to be most useful to you, or center weighted. But if you know that you're going to do a lot of editing and you've got a camera that will have great dynamic range, i.e. it can handle highlights and your shadows very effectively, then matrix or evaluative can be really useful, because you kind of don't have to think. You just take your shot and then you can tweak it in Lightroom, Photoshop, whatever you edit in, and bring that exposure back with your mid-tone slider or whatever. And I think that's the key, isn't it? And it's what we want this training to do, is to help you understand the various things available to you in terms of the tools available, so that right, I just want this to look great. If it's a dark subject like that bird on a lighter background, then center's probably going to be your best bet, or spot, just so that you get the tonality in the bird's feathers to be as close to what you want them to be, but knowing that your background's going to blow out probably quite a lot. But at least the main subject is sorted. And that can be part of that conversation in your mind, is what's most important for the shot that you're trying to achieve. Do you know what I mean? I think that's key to understanding metering. So, and also knowing that your camera is quite often wrong.
And that's the thing.
That's not what you agree with, or it's not. Your camera is just telling you what it can see. You're the one who has to choose creatively, or for accuracy or whatever, what you want it to give you. And that's how you have to understand your metering, and then understand aperture and shutter and ISO, so that you can get the image you want. Because some of our customers like very dark shots, to get that moody kind of, it's underexposed, but that's what they're going for. So understanding what your metering tells you, and then going, do you know what? I don't want it to be that bright. I want it to be far, far darker. So you're going to either tell the camera to do that straight out of camera at the time with your metering, and then underexposing with exposure compensation, or using a faster shutter speed, or an aperture that will cut the light out for you. Or that you want a bright, airy shot, so you're going to overexpose a bit, and that makes life a lot easier once you understand the different metering systems, for sure. So
because once again, the cameras are sort of, they're built to try and suit everyone, aren't they? And I think that's why they've ended up on that sort of that grey that we're all sort of familiar with. I mean, if you do look at sort of photography, you do hear the word sort of like maybe like grey cards sort of float about and stuff like that, and how grey is important, and it becomes down to the metering. It's that's what they're trying to work on. But as Joel was saying, it's about your relationship with the picture that you want to build up. So just because the camera is saying, right, this is right, that isn't gospel. and it's definitely something that you can experiment with. So if you want your picture to be darker, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Or if you want it to be lighter, and especially if the camera is saying, no, it's wrong or it's right. Take the fox picture that we looked at the very end there. It clearly looks better when we disagreed with the camera. It needed that light airiness. The snow needed to look white. So, just sometimes the camera isn't going to get it always right for you. And it's just sort of you deciding, what you want to achieve. I think it was very interesting what you said about obviously bringing out like the detail in it as well, because I've never looked at it from that point of view. Is that, if we looked, back to the Blackbird, for instance, technically it's black, so you should be sort of making your picture darker. But then sometimes on a picture, you can't actually have everything, can you? And if you want to see the detail within the feathers, like you said, you might need to sacrifice some of your highlights.
Yeah. And the key as well to understanding metering is clipping and understanding what data your camera is actually going to capture. Back in the film days, it wasn't as bad because film was much nicer handling highlights, blowing out highlights,
wasn't it?
Yeah, like you could get 5 or 6 stops perhaps, and also the drop off was way smoother. So even if you did blow out some of your highlights, you'd never really know because it tended to blend quite nicely back in to the rest of the image. But underexposing film was awful, and you just get some murky, horrible mess. Whereas digital is almost the other way around, where you might get a stop or 2 in digital on highlights, but you can pull out any number of stops quite often. Yeah, especially on a modern sensor. So if you're not sure how to, check your manual, Google it or contact us and understand the histogram on your digital camera. And as long as you're not peaking on the right hand side and it's, you're getting that very sharp end
edge
on the very edge, then just mess about with your exposure, because as long as it doesn't clip on that right hand side, you'll be fine, because your camera and the software that it works with will allow you to bring that detail back. And that's where the exposure is very useful, and the histogram is very useful to understand what the camera is actually seeing. I realized the other day when I was shooting, I think it might have been at the workshop, I had the histogram on because I had to put the Sony screen into sunny weather mode so I could actually see it. And that really throws you off when you're looking at your exposure based purely on the screen. You're like, this doesn't seem right. So zebras are quite useful, especially for video work, but also just having the histogram and knowing that I was able to push my exposure to be brighter, and it was fine because I knew that my detail would be there when I went to edit back afterwards. So again, what we're trying to teach you is to understand what's available to you so that you can make educated decisions based on what you want to achieve, because again, the camera is only a tool and it will do what you tell it to do, but it also has a bit of a mind of its own. So it will say, this is what I see, and then it's up to you, the photographer, to understand what that says and then make your decision whether you want it brighter, darker, or it's bang on. But I think the detail side of things is really helpful to understand in terms of shadows, because it allows you to make something that, well, in your image that you chose with the landscape and the tree, the big tree on the right hand side, it was very dark. But you might really want to pull out some of that detail because the texture in the tree and that side of the image could be quite interesting. So it's important to know how to meter so that you can get that detail back, because otherwise that might have clipped all black, and then you're kind of stuck then that you've just got this big black mass in your image rather than something that you have the ability to play with in post. So yeah, I think metering is one of those things that is very often confusing to people, because all the words and the symbols don't necessarily make sense unless you know what they mean, and it's not particularly sexy. but it's essentially what your camera is seeing, and that
yeah.
ultimately is the most important part of it, because apart from composition, what your camera outputs into a digital file or film, if you're still shooting film, that's the key. That's why back in the day, cameras that had light meters and had automatic exposure and things like that were kind of, this is amazing. Like the technology that was involved in achieving that was mind blowing. We take it for granted all the time because, especially with digital, we just see an exposure, don't we? We don't have to rely on the camera to tell us what it sees. And the amount of film cameras that come in and people are like, can you check the light meter? Like you don't ever really get somebody with a digital camera coming in and say, you check that this is exposing correctly.
Yeah,
like it's just not a thing, is it? But yeah, it's so important to
happens.
photography. And I think if you can get your head around what your camera is telling you in terms, or what you choose in terms of metering, it'll make your life so much easier. Especially in times where there's very high contrast, whether the sun's very high and it's very bright, or it's dark in areas and you really want to be able to expose for those darker areas because you want the detail out of it. I think it's key to understand how to achieve that.
No, that's brilliant. Should we go to some training related questions, John?
Yeah,
if we have any.
Yeah,
we do. If we don't now. Whoops.
Yeah, Johnny says, I've never really got my head around partial metering in what the camera is trying to achieve. Only ever really use evaluative or spot and occasionally centered. Partial never seem to make a difference.
Yeah, so partial. This is for Canon users. And partial metering sits in between its what they call evaluative and center weighted. So, if we're using me as, the metering screen at the moment, so evaluative is going to do all of this. Partial does like this. And then center weighted is doing this, and then spot is doing sort of that. So
if we just take your voice out of that'd be great.
And then put some music to it.
Exactly.
That last bit's proper dodgy as well, so no one put anything to that. Deary me, that's going to get me in trouble. Just compose myself a second. Just realised what I just did on live.
Oh dear.
And just let me. That's me adjusting the white balance on my camera, not my face going red. Right. Okay. So So essentially, what partial metering is doing is is really just the next step down from evaluative. So it's not going to do an awful lot. Where center weighted, it does come down into a little section, and then spot metering coming down again. So it's just that extra bit more. So brilliant question, Johnny. Thanks for joining in with the conversation as well.
And I think if you're not sure or you don't want to go into too much detail, I think evaluative can be very useful with a histogram, because unless you see very harsh clipping on your histogram, evaluative is very clever, and then you can alter your exposure either through compensation or just knowing that your raw file is going to have all the information you want. I think it's also important with any type of photography really, but understanding what you're trying to achieve, because once you know what you're trying to achieve, then the rest becomes pretty simple if you understand how your camera works. Going back to last training session where we were speaking about aperture and shutter, they obviously and ISO work in conjunction with each other to create exposure, hence the exposure triangle, but also knowing that if you really need a slow shutter speed because you're panning and you want that kind of illusion of speed, or you want to use an aperture that gives you a very shallow depth of field, then you're going to have to understand from your exposure meter what else you will need to do to make sure that that creative choice you've made is achievable. And that's where things like filters and flash and all sorts of other goodies come into helping achieve that exposure. So if you can get to the point where you can see the image in your mind,
that's
it's not
a really
always
good place
possible.
to be. Yeah.
But if you know what you're trying to achieve, then it's way, way easier to understand how to use your exposure meter settings and then your shutter aperture and ISO settings. Because then you can really focus on your composure and getting the composition correct.
100%.
And also enjoying the time that you're photographing.
I think you've absolutely hit the nail on the head there, Joel, is that at all points, then, this has to be an enjoyable experience. And, even in between these videos that you're watching as well, if you think that, oh, I don't really want to do that, I learned enough at, say, episode 4 of the training, that's absolutely fine. It's all about enjoyment. The intelligent auto mode, as we've discussed on previous training videos here, is absolutely fantastic. So if you want to stop there, that's absolutely fine. All of the things that we're talking about sort of need to be part of the enjoyable experience. And it's very interesting that you say about obviously controlling your aperture, shutter, and ISO, Joel, is because we've had a look at the effects of what all of these 3 things do to our pictures. And now we've looked at how metering works. The next training session that we'll be doing is how these both relate to these 2 things as well. So the next training episode that we'll be doing, we'll be going into how we can change our exposure with using aperture, shutter, and ISO.
Exciting times.
Indeed it is. Indeed it is.
Gotta love the exposure triangle.
The exposure triangle. So I'll try and see if I can put it in a different shape for next time. I don't even think that's possible. So I'll see how that goes.
Upside down triangle?
Well, I'm the person that does really sort of weird things with my hands on live YouTube. So there's no promises for anything, is there?
Johnny Mo says, I feel a meme coming on.
Yeah, I'm sure you can, Johnny. Thanks for that.
And I think you've explained that enough. Put your hands down. Thanks.
Yeah, there needs to be a rule. I think there's plenty of space down here, Joel, where I can put my hands. Absolutely no need for them to be up here. I think they're going to stay down here for the rest of the videos that I do.
But that would be boring.
It would be. It would be. But there we go. Joel, thank you very much for joining me this week again for the training session.
Thank you.
Is there any final thoughts before we close this video off?
No, I just think have a great weekend. The weather looks good today, but I don't know what it looks like for the rest of the weekend for everybody. But enjoy your extra Monday off as well.
Yeah, bank holiday.
You're forgetting that it's bank holiday.
I know. Well, none of us.
I'm sure when I drive home, I won't forget.
Yeah,
loads of people on the 55.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you to everyone watching as well. So it's wonderful seeing people tuning live, asking questions. It really does sort of help us actually coming on live as well. And it's why we like to do these things live. And if you haven't done already, please make sure that you share these videos. The more that you share the videos, the more it helps us sort of spread the word about what we do here on Photography Out Loud, the training sessions that we do, and also helps us Cambrian Photography as well. Please make sure you go over to our Facebook and YouTube channels. Make sure you like and subscribe. Again, that helps us sort of get the word out about what we're doing here as well. Right, until next week, we'll see you then. Bye-bye for now.
Cheers.